This is the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, giving you weekly sports analysis, opinions, and discussion. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and J-Raff.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 191st episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays, and alongside of me, Justin Raffoff.
Yeah, it's good to be back, and getting used to this time slot earlier in the afternoon, but I kind of like it. I know it's a little different. It gives us a little different things to talk about, but the games are underway, and so the NFL, there's never going to be a lack of topics. It's just what those topics may change focus a little bit.
Right, yeah, and it's just like we said last week, doing the show a little bit earlier, which is just family reasons, just stuff going on in our lives that kind of make it easier if we do this earlier in the afternoon. But it means we can't recap the early games because they're going on as we're talking here. We'll keep you up to date on those and any standout performances that may be impacting your fantasy teams. But we can talk about the Thursday night game and do a better previews of the late games, but more importantly, usually the Sunday and Monday night games. And I know this week the Eagles are in action in one of those contests. So, and a big one too. Although
it's a real big game.
Due to injuries and the like this year, it hasn't been as interesting as I think we would have liked it to be, but it still is very important to the NFC East because it's up in the air.
Right. NFC East has been the definition, and we've come back to this term, I think, a few weeks in a row on various shows, actually, and on various topics, but the NFC East hasn't necessarily been watching. You haven't been watching good football, but you've seen some close and interesting games. And honestly, that's kind of where the NFC East is at right now. Now, that being said, we're only like halfway through, so as we continue to go through, if a team gets healthy and hot, that last third of the season going into the playoffs and can really secure, the guaranteed playoff spot, which is right now what it looks like East is going to be relying on for the representatives. Yeah. But, if a team gets healthy and hot, the last third of the season, who knows? I look at, really, I'd say there's three contenders. Technically, there's still four in there. And by contenders, again, I mean for the division.
For the division.
Right.
No, yeah, I think people understand that.
I think Dallas, New York, and Philly all still have a legitimate shot at it. I know some people be like, Dallas, but, if Dallas wins today,
they're right back in it.
They're right back in it, and so...
And they'd be tied with the Eagles and actually would have the tiebreaker because then Dallas would have both
they would have beat them twice. Right. So, no one... And I think the Eagles, like I said, I've said early on, I think the season is going to, the games they play are a microcosm for the season. They're going to have done too much damage early on, and I don't think they necessarily will be able to overcome it. Even though I look at teams like the Giants, I think the Giants have maybe squandered the biggest opportunity here, because they, more than anyone, I think, should have jumped out to a bigger lead. When you look at it, they should have won Week 1 against Dallas, a division win, and they should have won Week 2 against Atlanta. And we've talked about this before. Even if they get one of those, if they get the Dallas one, which they absolutely should have gotten, that's a 2-game swing because it's a divisional game.
What I think hurts the Giants more so, other than their slow start, like you mentioned, is that loss last week to the Saints hurts on two levels. One, they couldn't extend their division lead, and two, the Saints are turning it around, and if it comes down to a lot of teams at 9 or 10 wins for the wild card, they now lose that tiebreaker.
Right. There is no way you should score 49 points in an NFL game and lose. Ever.
Dude, to me,
ever.
If you score, and this goes
in
all
the
levels.
30s, I think you have to win that game.
Yeah, well, I completely agree on that. I was going to say, if you score 28 or more, I feel like you should win that game.
Right.
And if you don't, your defense was awful.
I'm even thinking, if you're playing great teams, if you score 31 and a half,
right?
So I would put it at 31 and a half, basically meaning 4 touchdowns and a field goal.
Right. If
you score that, or more than that,
so 30 and a half.
You should absolutely win that game. Now, you're not going to necessarily win a lot if you're constantly giving up 30 points. But, the Giants had an opportunity, I think, maybe more so than anyone else, to distance themselves. The Cowboys are getting some guys back. Dez was back last week, but on the pitch count. He'll be back this week. But again, you never know with those foot injuries. Sometimes that can be a problem. It can cause other problems if he's not healthy. But anyway, that's a big game tonight because the Eagles could get the 4-4. Giants are playing later this afternoon against Tampa, who's 3-4. Not necessarily overly impressive, but not the pushover they were last year.
No, and they could have more wins too. They squandered the game against the Redskins.
Yes.
But we said that at the beginning of the year. We said Tampa Bay is not going to be a 2-14 team.
Right.
They didn't look good against the matchup of rookie quarterbacks in Week 1.
But to give Jameis credit, since then he's done what you need your rookie quarterback to do. He's making improvements. He still makes rookie mistakes, but he's making improvements. He's saying the right things. He's seems to be improving, and the team seems to be improving too. And last week was a huge win for them.
Yeah, Atlanta was on a roll. Now, Atlanta's a funny team because I predict them to win the division, and they were at one time undefeated, but none of their wins have been that great. They've gotten the wins, so people say, well, they're good wins because they got the W, and that's fine. That's all it comes down to. But when you're looking long term and projecting, they weren't great wins because they were coming behind almost, I think, at least 5 of their 6 wins, they were trailing in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So they weren't dominating any games, and now last week they trip up to Tampa Bay. Now maybe this will end up looking like not a bad loss. Maybe Tampa Bay will turn it around and get 7-8 wins and be one of those teams that's on the bubble.
You look at that, I'm like, Tampa sitting there at 3-4. The Eagles are at 3-4, and I just talked about how if they win today, they're right in the thick of it.
Right.
Now there's a difference. There's no undefeated team sitting there.
The
in
NFC
the
South,
East.
they have a 7-0 and a 6-2.
And the Saints look like they might have turned things around now too, at least offensively.
Right.
So
all of a sudden, the NFC South is pretty competitive.
Right. Whereas like a month ago, they looked like they were, it was the haves and have-nots. Now it's there's no real easy game there.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. So there are some interesting games between teams with losing records, basically. But because of the way the season's shaping up, losing record doesn't necessarily mean you are done right now. So we'll continue to kind of keep an eye on these things as we go through. But like you said, huge matchup for the Eagles and Cowboys tonight in Dallas. The Eagles, that's the game Romo got hurt and left last time, and Dez was already out, and the Eagles' offense was literally non-existent. They would have been better if they ran like the offense from like Waterboy, where they just punt and then just take their chances on picking off Brandon Whedon. That would have been their better option. I don't really know what to think. The Eagles are coming off the bye, so they have the extra week. They had, a chance to.
If Andy Reid was coaching him, this would be a guaranteed win.
Right, exactly. I really don't know what to think. It's a must-win. It's a primetime game, but there's nothing I've seen from the Eagles that leads me to believe, they're going to go in and take care of business today. It wouldn't shock me. Like, there was no outcome for this game that would surprise me. Eagles, everything from an Eagles blowing out Dallas to Dallas blowing out the Eagles, and anything in between, I could see it all.
Yeah, well, now,
absolutely.
Because of our location and your fandom, let's just focus on the Eagles a little bit more here before we move on. Let's look at the remaining schedule. You mentioned they're 3-4, but they're in the division because the division there's there's no great team, but
and their one division win is over the team that's ahead of them.
Exactly. So, and now obviously they still have to play them, and that is the last game of the year, which could realistically not only decide a division, could decide if any of them get in the wild card game too. So we got in Dallas tonight, Sunday night, NBC 8:30, big game. Next week, I consider that one a toss-up. Like you just said, it could be an Eagles blowout victory, it could be a Cowboys blowout victory, it could be everything in between. Next week, now to me, is a toss-up. I would favor the Eagles.
So would I.
But I who knows?
That's before the Eagles play this week.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Now,
but even if the Eagles blow them out and if the Dolphins lose today, I still consider that a toss-up because I haven't seen any consistency out of either one of the teams.
Either team, yeah.
So I would consider this week a toss-up, next week a toss-up. So technically, we're saying there's a 25% chance they win both those games.
I don't see any problem with that whatsoever. Right. But I also, 25% chance they lose both of them too.
Absolutely.
So they could be 3-6 on the week leading up to Thanksgiving, they could be 5-4 leading up to Thanksgiving. But that's where it gets. not interesting, but I guess the pressure really comes on because you have to win those next 2 games.
Yeah, Tampa
you have
and
to
Detroit.
beat Tampa, okay, the week leading up to Thanksgiving. Then on a short week, you have to go to Detroit, who's struggling this year, but it's Thanksgiving.
Right, it's Thanksgiving.
You have to beat the Lions. You have to beat the Lions on that Thanksgiving game. So, regardless of what happens against Dallas this week and at home against Miami next week, you have to win on the 22nd and 26th.
So they need to go 3 out of 4 here. They need to win 3 out of 4.
And you mentioned last week about my team. Miami needs to go 3-1, 3 out of 4 in November to be relevant in the AFC playoff.
I'm perfectly fine if that one is the Eagles. By the way, help us both out. And they can win the other ones in November. That would be fantastic.
So that's where we stand with the Eagles through November. Then I think we all are in agreement that the December 6th game is a loss.
Yeah.
The Eagles go to New England.
Don't get me wrong. I'm going to root for the Eagles.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying you're not gonna.
There is no way.
When analyzing the schedule,
there is no way the Eagles win that game. None.
December 13th, December 20th, December 26th, and January 3rd, to me, are all toss-ups. Now, maybe you would say the Arizona game is a loss.
Yeah. Now, not as confidently as I would have said.
Well, that's what I'm
3-4 weeks
ago.
And
this is over a month away, month and a half away.
So you don't know what'll happen between.
Arizona hasn't been playing.
Is Carson Palmer still going to be playing a month from now?
Perfectly reasonable expectation that he may not be. But looking ahead, then you have 2 must-wins. If they lose one of those 2 must-wins, that's a bad sign.
Yeah. Then you have to win one of the games you're not. You would have to win that Arizona game to even maybe make up for it, and maybe New England, which isn't
obviously the division games are important. The Dallas game this week.
Honestly, I think the worst one to lose would be Tampa, because Tampa at 3-4 may be in that pack of teams too.
Well, I was going to say the same thing about Arizona though, because you don't know.
Right.
Seattle and St. Louis are starting to play better.
Right. So
Arizona's not guaranteed to win that division. So
right.
if they slip back and are challenging for a wild card spot, you lose to Arizona on December 20th, and all of a sudden,
Bruce Arians I think is 2-0 against Chip Kelly already.
I think you're right. Yeah. So.
This game against Dallas is huge, because then that changes the tone for next week's game against the Dolphins, and then the following week is Tampa. So they're at Dallas tonight, but then they're home 2 weeks in a row. Then they're on the road 2 weeks. Then they're home 3 weeks in a row. The last 3 games of December for them, they are at home against Buffalo, Arizona, and Washington. Yeah. They've got a bunch of toss-up games that you have to win. You have to win some of these.
They have 9 games left, 6 toss-ups, 1 likely loss, 2 likely wins. I honestly
think if they go 6-3, I think
9-7. See, that's the thing. Being at 3-4, if you only get 9 wins, is that going to be good enough?
It's crazy. It'll depend what wins those are. If their losses are to Miami and
Buffalo,
Miami and New England,
Miami, Buffalo, New England, you lose to all the AFC teams.
And that's a possibility.
But then you
beat your NFC teams,
right? You have the ones that matter.
If they lose, even if they lose 2 out of those 3 to AFC East teams, and then 1 somewhere else, depending on who it is, you're giving yourself a chance. But I think 9-7 I would have nailed it when I said early in the season. Before the season, I thought they'd be better, but early in the season, when I was like, they're just going to dig themselves too deep of a hole. And you look at one of those games that they should have won early on that they didn't, and that's the difference again, just like last year. And I don't know. I think 6-3 is doable for this team. I don't know that 7-2 is. That's the problem.
And that's the thing.
7-2. I'm not sure I've seen anything that makes me really, I don't want to say confident, because I'm not at all confident, but I don't know if I had to put a ranking of 0 to 100 of my level of confidence that they'll go 6-3, I'd put it probably at 38%. I'd only give them a 38% confidence rating that they go 6-3.
Honestly, with the way they've been playing, and this coming from a unbiased, because I don't care. It doesn't matter to me, other than I hope they lose next week.
I hate you.
Honestly, I would say more likely than not, they're destined to go 5-4 or 4-5 and be 7-9 or 8-8.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because I don't think they're bad enough to only win one or two of those, but I also don't think they're good enough to win 7 or 8 of them.
Right.
I could see them winning 3, 4, or 5 though.
If I had to pick between them going 7-2 or 2-7, I'm gonna have to pick 2-7. How crazy is that? 2-7. I don't know. That would be a tough stretch to finish.
And then it also comes down to, what if they struggle a little bit here, but they win their last 3 and sneak into the playoffs? Now you're playing a team. We saw this happen with the Giants in 2011. They won their last 4 or something. Played the Patriots tough in the regular season and went on the.
And that's why this week is a big game, because if the NFC East continues to just stumble around, especially in their non-division game,
inconsistent,
then just if they keep winning enough to stay in it, and then they win, if they beat Dallas tonight, they will have split with Dallas. Their last 2 games are Washington and the Giants. If they beat Washington, they will have split with Washington. If they beat the Giants, they will have swept the Giants. All of a sudden, 9-6 probably gets you in then. You know what I mean?
9-7.
9-7 probably gets you in if they win their 3 remaining NFC East games starting tonight. I think 9-7 gets them in, because then I guess you have to find 3 other wins. Then that's the tough
looking
part.
at it, and we've analyzed this a lot.
On the other hand, if you add those losses in and those other teams don't pull away, and this is getting crazy, but does 8-8 get them in?
It all depends on what's happening in the other divisions. It's really tough to say without looking at everything, the grand picture.
Right. It's really tough to see, but I think 8-8 in the division, it's not unreasonable to think that, if the Giants fall off and if they beat Dallas tonight, that 8 wins could be what gets the division champion in. Now, it's not likely. I think you're going to need at least 9, but 8 could get you in.
It's not out of the realm of possibility, but looking at it, I think
the team that wins tonight, even if it's Dallas, which would only get them to 3 wins, I believe.
Yes, 3-5. They'd both be 3-5 then.
But Dallas has Romo coming back eventually. I hear all this talk, people are talking he's going to be back soon. No, he's out until at least a set date, because he's on the IR, that IR with eligibility to return.
The first game he's eligible is November 22nd, which is when Dallas goes to Miami.
Of course.
But
anyway, it's just one of those things that...
So he's out this week and next week for certain. Tonight and next Sunday.
I'm pretty sure there's not a more important 2-5, 3-4 matchup in the league than the Sunday night game.
You're probably right. Other than maybe that Tampa Bay game we talked about, but I think they're playing they're playing the Giants, right? Which actually that is a pretty big game too.
Go Tampa.
All right, so that's again the Sunday night football game on NBC at 8:30 tonight is Eagles visiting the Cowboys, and we just talked about it for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
that's a pretty big game. Before we move on to anything else, doing any previews or going over what's happening in the action in the early games, let's go to Thursday night and talk a little bit about Browns and Bengals just temporarily, because it wasn't a great game and it kind of finished how we expected it to. Cincinnati won 31-10, and we'll pull up some highlights for you and talk about the game. And as soon as I can hit play. All right, so, and this is from NFL.com, NFL Network video here, if you're watching us on Ustream. So, Browns had Johnny Manziel at quarterback, and I think it kind of went the way a lot of people expected it to.
Well, early on, you're like, oh man, Johnny Manziel kind of looks like he's, getting the job done, but then they kind of figured him out. I liked the announcer said, I think it was his coach at Notre Dame called Tyler Eifert when he was going in the draft. He's the guy that turns red zone field goals into red zone touchdowns. Because he just,
and it took a few seasons, but I mean he is on fire this year.
Right, and he was looking good last year until he had that really bad elbow injury,
which was on the first play of the year.
Right, but I mean, he was looking like he was poised to have a big year. But yeah, he's doing really well. And funny how that's so closely tied. Andy Dalton has been looking really good too. I know he had at least two.
He had two.
He had two in the first half.
Two.
And it's one of those where the Browns defense was supposed to be, what had over the last couple of years had been what kept them in some games, and even last year they had a decent record again, through most of the season, and then they couldn't put it together offensively. Now they're still struggling to put it together offensively, and the defense has kind of gone away. Now I know they were playing an undefeated team, but their rush defense is not good, and Joe Hayden does okay on the outside sometimes, but he's
been banged up this
right.
year.
Now I say that it's not like AJ Green didn't really light it up on.
No, yeah, thanks about that.
Right. On Thursday night, but
they still scored 31 points.
Right, and that's the thing. That's the difference with this Bengals team. Like, you look at last year where A.J. Green was out. Now, I know having A.J. Green in the game and not put up numbers is completely different than A.J. Green out. Like, I get that. But when they didn't have, like, anyone else and A.J. Green was a little banged up last year, they struggled to score. Well, now they've got two capable running backs, right, in Hill and Bernard, which they both do well when they go in there. Andy Dalton has, put it together, and they've got, A.J. Green and some other guys. The Bengals are looking good, but we say this every week, and everyone's going to say it. I want to see it in the playoffs, like when we get to the playoffs.
Yeah,
but this team, you look, tight end, and they can run the ball, and a good defense. This team's built for the playoffs now. It's not early on in Dalton. It was like they spread out and they were just gunning it to A.J. Green and those guys passing a lot. Yeah, it is a different feel. This Bengals team feels different to me than the last few years.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. And I still do think, that it's definitely reasonable to say I want to see it in January.
Oh, absolutely.
But they're 8-0. It just feels different.
Right. You don't get to 8-0 because, like, flukes in the NFL. Like, it doesn't happen. If you're talking like 5-0, 6-0, like when you start getting to 8, like we're halfway through November.
Through the season, they haven't lost.
We're halfway through November and they haven't lost yet. Okay, you're for real. And you look in that division, and we'll talk about some of the games today, but man, they could, depending on how things go, they could have this wrapped up by December. This division. On the other hand,
crazy.
There's two other teams in the AFC that haven't lost yet, so they wouldn't even necessarily get a bye yet.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Think about it. You could have a 2-loss team, in theory,
third seed
as the third seed.
Well, would be the third, depending on what else happens. But
right,
you would expect them to be the third seed.
Right. Think about that. You could have a 2-loss AFC team playing in the without getting a bye, and having to go on the road in the second week of the playoffs.
Yeah, it just depends on how way things shape up. But
how crazy is that?
Yeah, I mean,
now we're only halfway through, but
yeah, wow. I mean, boy, that would be something.
Now some of those teams play each other.
Well, I think the only ones that play each other are the Broncos and Patriots.
See, I thought the Bengals played them yet, but maybe not.
Well, let's check right now. Pull it up here. The remaining Bengals schedule is
they play
Houston, at Arizona, St. Louis, at Cleveland, Pittsburgh, at San Francisco, at Denver,
right,
at Cincinnati.
Right.
Could you imagine in Week 16 if those two teams are 14-0? But that would mean
Denver
beat New England.
But then think about how big that is.
What if Cincinnati's 14-0 and Denver's 13-1?
What if they all win, and you end up with a 15-1 New England team that lost at Denver that is the 3 seed?
It could happen.
Because 15-1 Denver that loses to Cincinnati is the 2 because they have the tiebreaker over New England.
Right. And then we're talking Cincinnati went 16-0.
Right. So 16-0 and 2 15-1 teams on the AFC.
Now
that's not going to happen.
If it would, it'd be the craziest, probably the best year for the AFC ever.
Right.
Like to have those 3 teams at like 15-1, maybe one better. Could you imagine?
No. No, I really.
But see, this is the funny thing. Like a few weeks ago, we are like, it's early.
Imagine being the wild card team that has to go to New England, though. A 15-1 New England team.
Oh man.
Now, I don't think it's going to play out that way, but just in terms of the record, and just for our listener in New England, I don't know when he'll hear this, but I'm only saying New England as the example lost there because of the way things work out. Yeah. In the schedule, that would work out. If they beat Denver, then
better talking point for
right.
us.
Yeah, it was just conveniently set up that way.
All right, let's talk about some of the early games here, or at least get some scores here.
Whoa.
Carolina is all over Green Bay. Now, Green Bay was undefeated going into Denver last week, and they struggled
in Denver. But the offense has struggled for a month.
And now Carolina has put up 27. They scored 24 second-quarter points.
It was 7-3 at the end of the first quarter.
And
Packers.
Carolina leads 27-7.
Right. Now, Green Bay just got the ball back, but they're 80 yards away and 40 seconds till halftime.
Right.
So if they can't get something here. Now, Panthers did get the ball to start the game. So Green Bay, if they could get a field goal and then or a touchdown and then get the ball back to start the second half, you almost think that's what they have to do. Because you look at the Panthers, while not terrific, you spotted them 20 points, man.
Wow.
Like that's tough.
Yeah, I mean, Green Bay on paper has the offense. They've shown it before, but 20 points in Carolina. Panthers are undefeated too, man. That's that's crazy.
Yeah.
That is absolutely crazy. Speaking of my uncle just a few moments ago, the undefeated Patriots are up on the Redskins 17-3. A little surprised it's not bigger than that.
Right.
But New England, I mean, they're in control. I don't see them losing to Washington, especially at home. So you expect New England to roll to 8-0, as looks like the Carolina is ready to go to 8-0. The 1-6 Titans are visiting the 4-4 Saints. The Saints are up 21-17, but Tennessee does have it in the red zone in the final 2 minutes of the first half. So that one's close, probably closer than we expected with the way New Orleans has been playing. This is a huge game for them because it's a game they have to win.
Except the Saints haven't been able to stop anyone. Like, they've outscored teams. They stopped Atlanta a couple weeks ago, but that was Thursday night. I write off, like, primetime games in New Orleans, like, that's just crazy stuff happens. Last week, I mean, they couldn't stop the Giants at all. They give up 49 points, and they still won. Like, that's insane.
That's
like,
crazy.
I still can't get over that.
You give up 49, you shouldn't win.
No. Just like we said earlier about the Giants, you score 49, you have to win. You give up 49, you should not win, and they did. Drew Brees looks like, hey, I want to play some more. Like, early in the season, it looked like.
If it's not for New Orleans, it should be for someone.
This being said, right, he holds the record for most games with consecutive games with a touchdown pass at 54. That ended a few years ago. He is currently at 44 straight games with a touchdown. Like, it's insane. It's insane. This is a guy could have been Dolphins quarterback. Just saying.
No.
I'm sorry.
Really?
I'm sorry.
You had to go there.
Him and Nick Saban could have been a dynasty man.
Speaking of the Dolphins.
I'm sorry.
They are in Buffalo and apparently not recovered from their extra time off after the shellacking New England game last week. They're in Buffalo. They're down 12. It's 19-7 favor the Bills. Miami spotted Buffalo 2 points on an early safety for the second week in a row.
Inside the 10.
But, yes, Miami does have the ball inside the 10. 30 seconds left in the first half. Hopefully they can get a touchdown or at least a field goal on the board. So that game's certainly not in doubt or decided yet. But Buffalo does lead Miami 19-7 right now. In a huge game in the NFC, Minnesota looking to really possibly tie the Packers in the NFC North if Green Bay loses to Carolina, which, like we said, Green Bay's down by 20. Minnesota is at home against the Rams, who are trying to jockey for position in the wild card race, or quite possibly, depending on what Arizona and Seattle do,
and
in
don't
the
forget,
NFC
the Rams
West.
beat Seattle week 1.
Right.
And they beat Arizona.
Two teams playing for a lot.
They beat Seattle and Arizona already.
There's a lot on the line in this game for St. Louis and Minnesota. Minnesota is losing down 2. They were up 10-6 at the end of the first, but the Rams have added 6 more to take the 12-10 lead. They're in the final minute of the first half, and the Rams have it in Minnesota territory. They're at the 30, but under a minute to play. But another very important game and a very close game.
Yeah. So, that's a big one there in Minnesota.
Jacksonville is in New York playing the Jets today. The Jets are trying to rebound after starting 4-1. They've lost 2 in a row to the Patriots and to the Raiders.
Right. Lost to the Patriots was a tough one. They played them well. They lost. The loss last week was Jets. It was the typical Jets. And their defense has been awful the last few weeks, which is un-Jets-like and un-Todd Bowles-like over the last couple of years. I immediately, when I heard Todd Bowles' defense struggling, I thought back to Philadelphia. Not necessarily his fault. Like, he was to blame some of it, but it went bad in Philly for him. But the Jets, gave up 10, but they were able to score 14. I don't know. The defense, here's one. If they give up more than 20 points to the Jaguars, though, I don't think they win the game.
No, you're right. You're right about that.
I say that. They could score one second-half touchdown, and still win if they give up 20. But basically, if they give up more than 10 points in the second half, I don't think they're going to win the game.
Right. The Jets trying to keep pace in the AFC wildcard chase, where the Jaguars are just kind of playing for pride, because even a win here at 3-5,
right?
I don't think they have much opportunity unless they be close to running the table to do anything in the AFC. But Jets up 14-10 at halftime, and a game almost at halftime, a minute to play here. Raiders getting ready to punt to the Steelers, who have the lead 18-14 in Pittsburgh. And another game with teams hovering around 500 or at 500, but incredibly important in terms of the AFC wildcard.
Well, the Steelers are right now 4 games behind the Bengals.
Right. So,
all right,
kind of kiss that division bye.
If they lose today, they're 4.5, and they've lost to the Bengals already. They're in a lot of trouble in the division, and at 4-5. And when we talked about, there's 3. As of right now, 3 unbeaten teams in the AFC already. That just means you could have some really good teams in other divisions that are going to be wild card teams.
Right.
So, yeah, Steelers need this one. So do the Raiders. The Raiders have it. Regardless of what happens here, the Raiders are heading in the right direction. Finally, now. I say that if something happens, right? Can they do it over the rest of the season? I don't know. But
they've got a young trio on offense, and Derek Carr, quarterback, Latavius Murray at running back, and Amari Cooper at receiver. Right. Michael Crabtree's playing well for them. Their line is blocking. Their offense has been able to put up some points. Then on defense with the venerable and apparently ageless Charles Woodson and Khalil Mack terrorizing defenses.
They need some help on defense, which is going to be interesting to see if the defense can hold up as the season goes on.
Right, and I mean, maybe they're a year early, but Oakland is definitely rebounding.
But also, look, all right, so they're getting some great experience and some big wins this year. If they can add help on that defensive side and continue to build on offense, man, they could be at the right spot at the right time in that AFC West.
Right, because who knows what's going to happen with Phillip Rivers? Who knows what's going to happen with Alex Smith and even Andy Reid in Kansas City, and same thing goes for in Denver.
Denver's on a year-by-year basis right now.
When's Peyton Manning going to hang it up? Not that he's lighting the world on fire. That defense is very good, but a lot of those players, I think, signed short-term contracts to kind of capitalize on the end of the Peyton Manning era. So there's no guarantees. Oakland could be getting hot at the right time.
Right, exactly.
So they trail Pittsburgh by 4 nearing halftime there. The Rams just kicked another field goal to go up 15-10 on the Vikings. Now, some of the late games, we previewed the Sunday night game. The 3 evening games feature, again, Giants-Buccaneers, which we talked about earlier. Falcons.
I don't like that the schedule's so uneven. I wish it was more even.
I wish there was another game late.
I think there should be a minimum of 4 games.
There's 6 teams on bye this week, so
which should also not happen. Like, that bothers me. I get it, but it bothers me.
One of the things being tossed around eventually in the next, I'd say probably 5-6 years, cutting the preseason back to 2 games and adding two weeks onto the regular season, not 2 games. 2 weeks, but each team would have 2 byes then.
Right, and I'd
17
favor that,
games, 2 byes.
Right, if it meant like that if it was more evenly distributed, like 6 teams on bye, like that's a lot, for 1 week. Like, why is it this week?
Yeah, the logistics surrounding that, I don't know what they're at.
I know the London games throw stuff in there, stuff, but whatever.
Then the last game, which at the beginning of the year should have been circled as a huge, exciting matchup, Peyton Manning returning to Indianapolis as a Bronco. They're undefeated. Thought the Colts could be there as well. Well, the Colts have struggled. They're 3-5. Who knows what's going on with Andrew Luck? And is Pagano going to be there next week, let alone at the end of the season? Denver looking to stay undefeated and be up there with Cincinnati and New England in the AFC.
You want to talk about an interesting dynamic here. There was an article on ESPN.com this week about how many high school football players in the state of Indiana are named Peyton, and it's like 50-some high school football players named Peyton in Indiana. He has a chance to set the record for regular season wins and record for passing yards in this game in Indianapolis. Like, there could be some and it wasn't like a bitter breakup in Indianapolis. It's not so
they just kind of decided to go their own separate ways.
So, and the Broncos, all the talk is how they want to win this game for Peyton because they lost last time, like his first trip back to Indianapolis. They lost. The team wants this so bad for Peyton. It's going to be interesting. I don't know how the Colts are going to score on their defense. T.Y. Hilton, I think, is out.
Yes.
I don't know how they're going to score. Now, because of that, Indianapolis will win.
Right, of course.
Because it makes no sense. That's what will happen. But no, it is a big game. Because Denver needs to keep pace with the other undefeateds. Because
it's so
Peyton
crazy.
needs to bye. Peyton needs to be one of those top two teams. At the same time, that defense, man, defense travels, and so going into Indy, I think Denver. I don't.
Oh yeah, I completely think that Denver's going to beat on them pretty good.
And yeah, it's interesting because he had some playmakers on defense when he was in Indianapolis, but the defenses weren't.
They were bend, don't break.
Right, and they just had pass rushers and guys in the backfield, and Peyton would put up a ton of points, and the other team always had the pass. This is different. This is a big-time defense.
It's a balanced defense that can
and
rush
people are
the
like,
passer,
Peyton lost
stuff
it.
the run.
Peyton doesn't have it. Okay, he's not the same old guy, but he threw for over 300 yards last week.
340.
Right. Now, he didn't throw for any touchdowns, but that's because they ran the ball down the throats of the Packers. They didn't have to. Right. Yeah, he didn't need to throw for a touchdown. He moved them right down the field, and they scored. And that's what they need to do.
So Denver goes to Indy tonight. They then host the Chiefs, travel to Chicago, and then the big one, the Sunday night game, Thanksgiving weekend, is quite possibly a matchup of undefeated teams when the Patriots go to Mile High to take on the Broncos.
I love Thanksgiving.
I wish that was the Thanksgiving night game. How crazy would that be?
That'd be great.
Be awesome.
See, that wouldn't well, it could because it's the NFL. The NFL could definitely give that game to the NFL Network. But
they should just be like, hey, so we're going to flip these games?
Right.
Because I'm not sure what game is that.
Yeah,
about that. Yeah. So I mentioned in passing, but it's 6-2 Atlanta at 2-6 San Francisco. That's the third and final 4:15 kickoff game. And then we talked a ton about Eagles Cowboys. The Monday night game is Bears Chargers. Neither team really playing for anything.
I really thought about in this one, and I not all I thought about, but one of the things was about how when the schedule came out, they talked about how there was some rumblings at ESPN because of the way ESPN handled some NFL news that. When the NFL gave the schedule, they gave Sunday night games to NBC were really good games.
Well, that was actually explained in the book. These guys have all the fun. The book about ESPN.
Right. And I think this follow-up article was kind of about that idea as well in terms of just applying it towards this season. And yeah, it's now some of that there's no control over it. Some of that there's very little. We thought the Bears were going to be bad, but we thought the Chargers were going to be good.
Right.
We thought they were going to be challenging. They seem to have found their offense, all this stuff. By the way, Keenan Allen, lacerated kidney,
Yeah.
I just think about getting hit hard enough to tear your kidney. That's.
Well, we know someone. We could ask him how that feels.
I imagine it hurts.
He actually sent a tweet out and was like, I feel for you, bro, or something like that on Twitter. So that was funny last week. But looking ahead, the Thursday night football game on Thanksgiving is Bears at Packers. So,
right.
I mean, a rivalry, historical game,
right.
but Bears are out of it. And depending on how the Packers are playing, who knows? They might be still fighting with the Vikings for that division title.
And we said the Eagles and Lions play, so I'm interested in that game. Panthers, Cowboys. That could be, especially the Cowboys win tonight, that could be.
And if Romo's back.
Right.
That could be his second game back, because the week before they play the Dolphins in Miami. That I think is the first week he's eligible.
Thing. So do you bring him back there? Well, I mean, I don't know how you handle a collarbone issue. Do you bring him back and then play him when he going into a short week? You know?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to say.
Especially, what if they don't win a game between now and then?
Right.
You know? Then do you do it? A guy who has a history of injuries like that, like, do you rush him back? It all depends on what the other teams do.
Right,
Actually,
exactly.
No, it doesn't. It matters on what Jerry Jones wants to do. Let's
True.
be very clear about this. It is very different than any other team's situation. It is solely going to be Jerry Jones' decision.
Yeah, you're right about that. So that's NFL Week 9. Not too much had changed. I did see that apparently Miami sucked and didn't get any points inside the 9 in the final minute of the first half.
I think they had a timeout, too.
So I have no idea what happened there. I'm assuming they turned the ball over.
I'm just thinking it's probably better we were down.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely better. So we're going to wrap things up here. We're actually going to be off now. 2 Sundays we're not going to be doing this show. Next Sunday we're off completely. We both have things to do. I'll be at the Dolphins-Eagles game, so that'll be fun.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the next week when we're going to be doing the Bulldog Hour. It'll be after 2 weeks of playoff action. Hopefully Wilson will have won both weeks, and we're previewing a District 3 semifinal matchup with probably either Exeter or Cumberland Valley.
I'm hopeful that I think I've been down there for 2 games this year.
Oh, to Wilson? Well,
I
expect that you're going to be a little bit more available now.
Yeah, schedule's not quite as full the next few weeks.
So nothing going on from us next week, the 15th. The 22nd, we'll be recording the Bulldog Hour episode 4. Then we'll be back on the 29th, which is interesting because we just mentioned that night is the Patriots-Broncos game. So that's the week. We'll be talking weekend of Thanksgiving football. The weekend after Thanksgiving is when we'll be doing this show again. So we'll talk about the 3 Thanksgiving games. We'll talk about the Sunday afternoon game, but we'll probably talk a lot about, if it goes as expected, quite possibly 10 or 11-0 teams facing off on Sunday Night Football.
I hope it happens. I honestly, I kind of root for those things. Now, that being said, I would love to see the Eagles knock off, New England when they play them and things like that. But hey, it makes for exciting games down the stretch. Watching the Panthers, play, watching Indy play, Now, I say Indy's another bad, or not Indy, Denver is a bad example because, I tend to root for Peyton Manning. But, I want to see big games. I don't want to see the Bears against Chargers tomorrow. I really don't care.
Don't have any interest.
But, tonight, even if it's not a good game, I'm interested because it's Denver at Indy. That game there's a story there.
Yeah, that one will kick off in about an hour and a half.
I'm excited about that one, so.
Yeah, so that's the schedule here. If we stay on track, we have it planned out that we'll be doing our 5th anniversary and 200th episode on the exact weekend that the show started 5 years ago.
That's crazy.
I would love to be able to do something special. Justin and I need to start talking about that, and now that both of our seasons have ended or wind down significantly, we can start planning on if we can do something special for that 200th episode. That'll be in mid-February, I think, the weekend after the Valentine's Day, so it'd be February 20th or 21st.
A couple weeks after Super Bowl.
Right, yeah. So we'll be, NFL will be over, but we'll see if we can do something kind of with a local flavor, just if we can get, special participants or something and do something at the church again or something. We'll talk about it, but that'll be coming up because the next time we're on Thanksgiving Sunday will be episode 192, so about 2 months away. Anything else to add before we sign off here?
No, not really. I'm interested in this Eagles game tonight. By interested, I mean terrified that they're going to get housed. I just don't. I don't know. I think they could win, but I am not at all confident that they will.
Yeah, no,
that's the spirit.
Yeah, yay! I don't know what to expect either.
And honestly, it's been a terrible sports weekend, so they're going to get housed.
Just put a cherry on top.
Or they'll go up big and blow it. I don't know. Not that I'm being pessimistic. Enough of me. I've held it together long enough. I don't need to rip the Eagles.
Good, great, grand, wonderful. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. That wraps up the 191st episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
We hope you tune in every Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock for our take on sports. Until next time, I'm J-Raff.
And I'm Joe Mays. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Don't forget, you can download each episode of the show from the podcast section of the iTunes Store. We'll see you next time, and thanks again for listening.